It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome back, after a couple of weeks off, to the Double Stop. And thanks to those who wrote in with a few words of support. On this week's show, I have Greg Howe. Now, Greg's had a really interesting career. He came out huge with his first instrumental album in 1988 on Shrapnel Records. And then he changed it up right away and did a vocal album with his brother, which had his fans kind of scratching their heads. And then after returning to instrumental albums, he made another left turn and had a lucrative career as a guitarist for such pop acts as NSYNC, Enrique Iglesias, and even Michael Jackson. And then just when things had gotten safe for Greg, he returned with an all-original vocal band called Marigold, this time with a group of unknown musicians. That seems to be the theme in Greg's career, making left turns when things get too safe. This is the story of Greg Howe, a guitarist whose career has flip-flopped between security and risk.
Originally, I was born in New York City. Our parents moved to a small town in New Jersey shortly after that. Probably, I guess I was around the age of 4. Went to school in my younger years in New Jersey, in a small town called Washington, and then eventually moved to Pennsylvania in another, larger town called Easton, Pennsylvania. As far as musical background, my mother was a singer briefly when she was younger, in nightclubs and things like that, but it never really became a professional thing. She, got pregnant with kids and got married. My father really was not involved in music at all. I think at one point when he was very young, he might have been interested briefly in drums, but never did really anything musically. So I have 2 sisters. My oldest sister, who's actually a half-sister, is not really involved in anything musically. My full sister, who's 3 years older than me, younger than my oldest, she has had a fairly successful career as a singer and has done all kinds of things with publishing deals and backup singer events. She was actually, she's worked with more in the R&B world with people like Melba Moore and Freddie Jackson. And I think she at one point toured with Julio Iglesias, the father of Enrique Iglesias. So she's done and is still doing things to this day. So that's the extent of musical background. My brother, as you probably know, is 2 years younger than me, and he and I were always musical. Even from the time before we could even play instruments, we just sort of naturally understood the whole premise of music, and we understood. Yeah, it was very strange. It was just a natural thing where, we just knew how to harmonize. We knew how to sort of write songs. We could write songs before we could even play instruments. In fact, it was because of that we eventually started to learn how to play instruments. As a matter of fact, when I was probably around the age of 9 or 10, my father got a little bit irritated with the fact that we would always grab this acoustic guitar and just kind of make noise with it and do silly things with it. And he said, I think that you guys should, if you want to be musicians or if you want to do something musical, you should take lessons and learn how to do this. And I actually wanted to play drums, and I should actually back up a little bit. We did have a small drum kit that we got for Christmas one year, and I would always play it. And I could play along with Beatles records and Rolling Stone albums, and sort of knew how to work the hi-hat, that sort of basic independence that comes with keeping a straight groove. And I liked that a lot. And as a matter of fact, now that I think about it, we used to do this thing where we had a keyboard, some cheesy little toy keyboard, but we would play chords on it, and I would play drums, and we would record that, and then we'd sing to the recording while recording that whole thing into another tape recorder, so that we'd have sort of like a band with us.
And how old would you have been doing that?
we were young. I was probably 9. My brother was probably 7, maybe 10 and 8 kind of thing. But we were very young, just playing around. And, at the same time, this is during the era of like Don Kirshner's rock concerts in the 70s. And so we would grab tennis rackets and pretend to be, Alice Cooper and the Beatles and,
of course,
the Rolling Stones. But what happened was that, let's see, so my brother actually wanted to play drums. When my father finally asked us, who's going to play what, because I'm going to take you guys to lessons, my brother said, I want to play drums, and I sort of got stuck playing the guitar. So I took a few guitar lessons. I took about 3, maybe 4 guitar lessons in my entire life and didn't learn anything at all, because they would have me playing these really simple melodies, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star kind of things, and reading out of the Mel Bay book. But the problem was that my ear was good enough that I really didn't have to sight read anything. So I wouldn't really practice that because it was so easy. So I'd come back the next week for a lesson and pretend that I was reading it, but really I'd be playing it by memory and playing it by ear. And plus I would get stuck with almost a different guitar teacher every week, because these were guys that were probably late teens, early 20s, who were just kind of looking to make extra money. So that ended, and luckily we had, at that time, foster kids that were staying with us occasionally. My parents would take in foster kids, probably for extra money. One of them played guitar and had an acoustic guitar and knew how to play open chords like C and D and open A, and taught me that. And so I learned how to play chords, and that was really all I wanted to know, was because this gave my brother and I the ability to have music that accompanied songs that we would think of, and plus we could actually play songs that we heard on the radio and sort of at least get through the chord changes and sing to them and stuff. So I was just really, I never even understood or was concerned at all with single note playing and lead guitar playing. I didn't even know what it was. It had never even occurred to me to do that. And this probably went on for the next couple of years, where we just play songs, and guitar was just fun to play, and it was just basically playing open chords. And the foster kid who had taught me chords had eventually left, but he came back to visit us a couple of years later, and I remember that he showed up, and I said, "Hey, let's play guitar together." And at this point, I was probably maybe 12, and he said, "Yeah, let's do it." And we started playing, and he did a very interesting thing that changed my world. He, at one point during our jam session, he bent a note on the guitar. He played a single note and bent it. And and I just thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And then for the next 6 months, I was just bending notes, and then inadvertently sort of stumbled across pentatonic scales, really more or less by ear, just hearing things that were, I have a guitar on me, but I would hear, I knew that if I heard a chord that sounded like this, that I could do things like this. Right, so my ear would sort of guide me through that, and eventually I learned how to almost instantly be able to improvise, hearing any diatonic chord progression like on the radio or something. I could almost improvise and play along, and so that was the introduction to my guitar playing. And even at that point, it was still more or less just something to do for fun. It wasn't something I was taking that seriously. And then I discovered Led Zeppelin, and then I was able to sort of mimic a lot of solos that I heard from Jimmy Page, and that didn't seem real difficult. And I thought, wow, this guy, this guy's considered the greatest rock guitarist of our time, and I'm able to play these licks. So wow, I must be pretty good, and I'm not even practicing that much.
Oh, dude, you're killing me. You're killing me here.
So where things really got serious was in was in 1978 when I heard Van Halen for the first time.
Yeah.
And I was probably around 14. And that was when I heard stuff being done that I couldn't duplicate and I couldn't figure out. And it was very interesting because there were all these rumors going around at that time that he was using his right hand on the fretboard. And I just thought what that meant was that he had learned sort of a classical guitar technique with finger picking. And so that when he was doing stuff like you know, when he was doing that, I thought that what he was doing was playing each of those notes on a separate string and then arpeggiating with his fingers of the right hand really fast, like a flamenco player would do. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the stuff in the tablature books back then, or you know, music notation books back then, had it that way because the technique was just not popular enough for anyone to have assumed it was being done that way. So I actually took classical guitar lessons one summer from this guy because I wanted to learn what Van Halen was doing. And again, the lessons didn't amount to much. I mean, they were fun, and he was a good guitar player. He was a good rock guitar player, and he did know some flamenco stuff and some classical guitar stuff, and he was kind of able to do that. But I could tell that it wasn't the same thing somehow. It somehow wasn't sounding the same. And it wasn't until probably a year later that I actually went to a concert at Nassau Coliseum and saw him live with my binoculars. And the instant I saw him, I couldn't wait to get home because I knew what the trick was. I knew what was going on. And I, you know, my friends dropped me off in front of my house. I remember it was like 3:00 in the morning. I ran upstairs, plugged in my electric guitar, and basically played his classic unaccompanied instrumental guitar piece called Eruption. And I was, you know, proud of the fact that I was, at least in my small town, the first kid on the block that could do that. So, and then it really became an infatuation. The guitar became something that I knew I wanted to do. That was really the beginning of my serious consideration about being a musician full time. So, and that's it. I became really infatuated with guitar. After that, I just started to play all the time. And immediately after I graduated from high school, I put a band together with my brother. And
was he singing by then?
Well, I guess, yeah. The next phase would be that what happened was I graduated from high school, and then immediately started teaching guitar out of my mom's house. And my parents had gotten divorced by then, or had split up by then, so I was living with my mother. And, you know, for extra money, I was teaching guitar lessons. And one of my students was one of my classmates, and he was able to very easily learn the stuff that I was showing him. He just had a sort of natural fretboard agility. And he would always say to me, because he would come into my house and he'd see me playing along with Van Halen records note for note. And he would always say, "Man, you got to get in a band. You got to put a band together. You should join a band. You know, I don't know anybody who can play that stuff, and you're playing it note for note." And I was like, I would love to get in a band, but there's nobody around here. There's nothing. I don't know of anybody.
Yeah, that is a little weird, really, to be that age. You're finishing high school and you're that good, and you haven't been in a band yet.
Right. I mean, we had little bands that we had put together in school, but nothing that was, serious enough to go out and play in clubs. You know, it was
right.
We were, and but at this point, I was really itching to get something going, and so I said to him, "Well, I know a couple of drummers, but you have such a natural knack of learning stuff on the guitar. I mean, you could easily be a bass player for this kind of music." And he said, "Do you think so?" I said, "Yeah." And the very next day, he went out and bought a bass guitar and a Serwin Vega amp. And then for the next few months, we just sat. He'd come over to my house and we'd learn songs off the album, note for note. And our intent was to eventually get a drummer, which is exactly what we did. And then I went to my brother and I said, we have a band that sounds pretty darn good. Do you want to sing? And I remember that he just looked at me like he just thought I was crazy. Like, really? You want me to sing? I say, yeah. Why don't you sing? I know you can sing. Let's do it. So he did. He decided to sing. We started rehearsing, and then we started getting gigs at local fairs, and then back, parties and, high school dances. And we started just going out and doing that. And that eventually led to getting into clubs. We put a press kit together. We put pictures together. We got photos done. Did a little demo of some cover tunes and passed it out to all the clubs that we could find that were in a 100-mile radius, and eventually started getting gigs. And so that's really was the beginning of a professional career, I guess. We didn't make a lot of money doing it, but we loved doing it, and we got we were able to hone in on our live thing and get a real taste of what it's like to play in clubs and to deal with sound checks, deal with sound men, deal with club owners, drive long distances and carry big equipment through the snow and all that
pay
stuff.
Some dues.
Yeah, pay the dues, right. And we really did. And eventually we started to write our own songs and record demos, and then we tried to, we started submitting stuff to record labels in the hopes of getting a deal. And we did go through some band member changes along the way, but I mean, all along, my brother and I were really sticking together and just, powerhousing through this and trying to move it to the next level. And we were able to finally get some showcases set up. We were able to showcase for record labels, but we really didn't get anything that bit. Eventually, there was, at that point in 1987, there was a column in Guitar Player magazine that was run by Mike Varney called Spotlight. And in this column, he would feature 3 unknown guitarists from around the world every month and then comment on them. And if they were really good, he would sign them to his label called Shrapnel Records, which was an independent label that basically specialized in cutting-edge rock-based guitar. And I eventually sent a demo to him, really not thinking at all that I was qualified to be featured or to be, I didn't even know that I was worthy of being on that label, but I felt like it's a label. So if I could send some of our songs, and maybe I'll send some tracks of me playing lead guitar over some backing chords. Who knows? Maybe he'll like it. If nothing else, maybe he'll hear the band and think that we're good and be able to refer us to someone or something. To me, it was just something else to do, some other avenue to go down in the hopes of getting into.
So your brother wasn't on that?
He was on a couple of the songs. Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. It was a long time ago. I think what I ended up sending Mike Varney was maybe two of the demos of the band, and then 2 or 3 tracks of me just blowing over chord changes, some chord changes. And the one thing I did do was I sent the tape to the P.O. box that was requested in the column, but I also decided to send a Federal Express overnight package to Guitar Player magazine, knowing that if it's FedEx, someone would have to, it would have to be handed to someone physically, and someone would have to sign for it and do something with it. And it really worked, because I got a phone call the very next day from Mike Varney.
Oh, wow.
Who said, I got your demo. I really like your playing. I want to feature you, and I'm also curious as to whether or not you'd be interested in, me signing you to my label. And I said, of course. Yes, of course I would. Now, this was a big transitional phase for me, because on the one hand, I was happy about getting a deal. On the other hand, Mike really wanted to sign me, and he wasn't that interested in the band. So my original deal with him was a 4-album deal, and I immediately got into negotiations with him because I said, I can't just abandon my band. This is my brother. I believe in this. I love this. So I don't mind doing a couple of instrumental albums, but if we're going to do this, I want to break it up in half. So 2 of the albums I want to be my band, 2 of the albums we can do instrumental. And that was how that thing went down. So my first album ended up being an album called Greg Howe, and then the second album was with our band, which at that point was called How To with my brother, and the album was called High Gear. And the third album of that original contract was also the band with an album called Now Hear This. And then the fourth album ended up being my second instrumental album called Introspection. The interesting thing about my first solo album was that I had never written an instrumental song prior to this. I had no idea how to do that. I didn't even know, I had never even thought about it, because everything that I had done up to that point was really, I'd come up with the riffs, I'd come up with the chord changes, and then I'd hand it to my brother, and he'd come up with the melody lines and the lyrics. So my job was over by I come up with the music, submit it to him. And that's how it always worked. And it was very easy. But suddenly I was challenged with this whole new dimension of songwriting where I had to be responsible for the sort of lyrical end of the guitar playing, or the melody lines and the sort of, the melodies, basically. So I had to think on a whole different level. And it was definitely a new experience, and it was a good one, but it was one that I had never considered prior to getting the record deal with Mike Varney. So it was a great situation when I got my record deal. Mike had set it up so that Billy Sheehan would play bass on my first album, and he also got 2 of my songs to be featured in Guitar Player magazine on one of those floppy record things.
Oh, I remember those, yeah.
Yeah, and he also set up a deal with Fender Guitars. Fender at that time had just come out with, they were kind of late in the game coming out with the sort of post-Van Halen humbucker-oriented Strat, or, humbucker-oriented offset double cutaway style guitar, which everybody else was doing at that point. Fender had sort of not done that until the very late 80s, and then finally they came out with this guitar called the HM Strat, which stood for Heavy Metal Strat, although everybody thought that it stood for Howe Model Strat, because I was the only guy that they got to be the catalyst for this. So I was the guy that was playing that guitar and being featured in the ads. But Mike had facilitated that. He had Fender come up to the studio while I was recording, and it was really, really a powerful and impactful debut for me, because I had all of this, full-page advertisement power coming from Fender Guitars. I had Billy Sheehan, who had just come off the David Lee Roth thing. It was all over MTV. And I also had the sort of uniqueness that most of the guys that Mike had signed prior to me were all doing the sort of neoclassical metal high-tech guitar stuff. So it was like Paul Gilbert, Vinnie Moore, Tony McAlpine. Mike had also discovered Yngwie Malmsteen. So all those guys were incredible players, but they were also stylistically all sort of in a similar genre. Whereas my thing ended up being, I think, really the first album that he did that was, high-level shred playing, but with more of a bluesier backdrop as opposed to the neoclassical thing. So that also gave it a unique stamp. And so the album really did well, and it was a cool debut for me. It was a great, powerful, and a lot of those fans are still with me to this day, which is a great testament to the way that things went down, on that original recording. So that was that's really what happened. And then the second album, the band was flown out to California and recorded the High Gear album. That was my brother and Joe Navolo on drums and Vern Parsons on bass. And I really, for that time, I thought that album was good. But again, that album came out in either 89 or 90. And it was, again, a little, was it 89? Okay. Yeah. So it was a little late for that, stylistically, for what we were doing, because the rock music at that point was right on the cusp of really changing over from the sort of glam metal phase to the more Seattle grunge phase.
Yeah, but you're also coming out with a record with a vocalist when you had your first one as an instrumental, and it went pretty huge. So like, were fans unexpected of that?
I think they were. I think it got, to this day, I just got off a 3-week clinic tour in Europe, and it's really interesting to run into some of the older people who remember all of this. And some of them are really, I can tell that some of them are really like, I love your instrumental stuff. And other guys are like, man, the how-to stuff you did with your brother, man, it's my favorite stuff you've done. And some people like both of it. But I do think that the industry, in terms of like the products industry people, the musical products industry people, I think they were, after my first album, really kind of hoping that I was going to go more in the Eric Johnson solo guitarist, new guy on the block. And I think some of them were disappointed when the vocal album came out, because I just think it was just sort of like, wow, that was a strange left turn.
It's the same thing Richie Kotzen did, though, too.
Yeah, well, Richie got signed right after me, and he did do the same thing. He sort of, I don't know that it was deliberate, but the format that he followed was very similar, where he came out with an instrumental album. He had some high-profile people on his first album. I think he had maybe Steve Smith and somebody else, and then his second album was a vocal album, and things really worked out for him, because he ended up getting a deal on Interscope almost immediately after that.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
But with my situation, I think that the How to High Gear album was just late. It was basically 5 years too late, and when we did the second album, even though the tour that we toured that album right after we did it, and it was a very, very successful tour in the US and Canada. And it was really a great tour. I mean, honestly, it was surprising that almost every place we played, even in the Midwest and these remote towns, there'd be 300-400 people at every single gig. And I was really excited about that. But I noticed that when we did the second album and toured that, which was, I think, maybe 91 or somewhere around there, the mood had all changed. And suddenly I noticed that a lot of the bands that were scheduled to open for us at these places were coming from a whole different thing. A lot of the crowds were different. The response was not anywhere near as enthusiastic. And suddenly I felt like, we've entered a new age of here, and we should really get back to headquarters and regroup, because it's clear that what we're doing is out of style. It's not working anymore. And at the same time, my brother was really going through a lot of difficult issues with substance abuse, and this was also putting a lot of strain and tension on the band. And we just sort of, just fell apart, because we were trying to figure out what to do, where to go, and then, like I said, issues with my brother. This is when I decided that, well, let me do my fourth album of this original deal, and then we'll figure out what to do after that. And so I did the Introspection album, which was the fourth album of my original deal, and it was a great opportunity for me to explore some other ideas musically that I had been dabbling with, but that I had not previously been able to do comfortably on his label. His label had expanded at this point, and he had he had the sort of subsidiary blues label, and he was doing some different things that weren't all just hard rock or heavy metal. And so I decided that I wanted to get into doing some stuff that was different. So Introspection ended up being an album where I was able to bring in a lot more of my sort of jazz influences. And, I had done a lot of listening to guys like Larry Carlton and, John Scofield and Alan Holdsworth and George Benson. But a lot of those things I was never able to really bring into bring into these previous recordings because of the genre that we were in and what the label was expecting of us. So now that it had expanded, I was able to explore some more of these influences. And that album was received very well. And at that point, I sort of was in the state of limbo, trying to decide what to do. And I thought, well, I've got a little studio here at my house. Maybe what I'll do is just make some records, until I figure out what I want to do. I'll just keep making records and putting them out.
Okay. Yeah.
And and that's really what took place throughout the 90s was just, honestly, my mindset was really like, I don't know what to do here, but I do know that it's fun to keep pushing the envelope of my own musical capabilities and explore new things and put new things out and, make a little money with advances from the label and just see where this goes. And that's really what the 90s was to me. So, the sequence was, I think, Introspection, and then I renegotiated the contract. I think we signed for 3 more albums, or 3 or 4, I don't remember. And that's where Uncertain Terms, and then Parallax, and then I did an album with Richie Kotzen called Tilt, and then I did an album called 5, and then I did another album with Richie Kotzen, and then I did an album called Ascend, and in '99 I did an album called Hyper Acuity. And at that point, I had gotten connected up with a guy named Kevin Antunes, who was the music director for a lot of these big bands. So I guess to back up a little bit, in '96, I went on tour briefly to fill in for Jennifer Batten with Michael Jackson, which was amazing.
Yeah, a little bit. How did you get that gig?
I had met Jennifer at a NAMM show at some point in the early '90s, I guess. And she said that she liked what I did, and she was a fan. And I said, well, I'm a huge fan of you. And we just got to talking, and she said, look, if I ever step off this tour for whatever reason, I'm going to recommend you because I think you'd be ideal for it. And I thought, yeah, well, you're not going to get any arguments from me. and that's what eventually happened. I mean, there's a long version of the story, but to summarize it, what actually happened was her mother got ill eventually, and then she knew that she was going to be stepping off the tour. And she basically said, I don't know exactly when, but you should be waiting by the phone, and because you could get this call.
Did you start learning songs?
Yeah, she was very kind. She actually took the time to take a tape recorder and put it in front of her speaker cabinet from a rehearsal, so I could literally hear what she was playing in the context of all the songs, and she wrote down all of the presets that were on her Digitech unit.
Oh, wow.
She really prepared me. And for a while, I was listening to the stuff and I was learning the stuff. But many weeks went by, which turned into many months. And then, I was turning down gigs because I didn't want to miss the phone call. And this is before the age of cell phones and the convenience of being in Japan and getting a call anywhere. Enough time went by that I was finally like, look, I can't have my life dictated. I can't be at the mercy of this phone call that might happen. I have got to get back to doing my thing. So I really just kind of did, and I stopped listening to the stuff, and I kind of forgot about it. And again, months went by until eventually I got a phone call and I think somewhere in October of '96, a frantic phone call from the music director for Michael Jackson, who said, "We would like you to be on an airplane tomorrow morning at 6." So this is a Monday night around 8:00.
Oh God, when was the first gig they wanted you to play? How soon?
Wednesday. Right?
Yeah.
So check this out. It's 8:00 on a Monday night. They want me to be on a flight, a 6:00 flight that flies out of. I still lived in Pennsylvania at the time. They wanted me to be on a 6:00 flight out of, I think, Newark, that leaves to go to Amsterdam, which means I have to be at the airport at 4. And I live 2 hours from the airport, which means I have to leave my house at 2. So I essentially have 6 hours to prepare the set and pack my clothes and do laundry and learn these parts and try to remember how things go. And it was absolutely insane because I was completely unprepared, completely not ready for it. And you can imagine me just running around the house, with the Walkman on, listening to stuff, picking up the guitar occasionally, folding underwear, looking for, throwing another load of laundry in, it was insane. And so I did the gig. I got on the plane, got to Amsterdam, and Tuesday I had a little bit of time in the hotel room to sort of go over things a little bit, but not much because everything was sort of orientation and getting me to know this is where you go to do this. This is the people you want to talk to about that. So it's a lot of just kind of directing me and showing me the whole Michael Jackson entourage and letting me in on how the inner workings of that, operated. And so Wednesday was the day of the gig. And the crazy thing is that I get Wednesday morning, they say to me, "We want to do a run through with you," because they haven't heard me play. They have no idea whether or not I'm even competent.
This is a choreographed show too.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, that's the part that's so funny because they wake up the whole band and around noon, and these guys have been on tour already. They've been on tour for many months. And it's irritating for them to have to get up and go through a rehearsal for the new guy. Half these guys have been out drinking all night and, partying, and the last thing they feel like doing is this. So we get up, we do this rehearsal run-through thing, and I started to breathe a sigh of relief because I could tell that it was working. I was getting through it. I got through like 4 songs, and I'm like, you know what? I think I can do this. I think this is actually going to work. And so the production manager comes over to me and he says, "Yeah, sounds good, Greg. I think it's going to be fine. So at this point, I guess we should talk about the choreography."
Yeah, there it is.
And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me. We're going to be on stage in about 6 hours." And it was a lot of choreography. If you've seen the show, Jennifer had the most interaction with him of anyone. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff in almost every song. There's something, right, that you have to do. So, and one of the things was I had to operate this pyro guitar that literally shoots an explosive out of the headstock. And the guy's like explaining it to me really fast. And he's like,
"What could go wrong?"
Right, exactly. I just remember that as he's explaining it to me, he's talking really fast, and the last thing he says to me is, "You want to point that headstock away from you when you finally hit the final switch because you don't want to blow your face off." That's what he says to me. and that's all I heard was, "Here's a pyro guitar, blah, 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 blah. Don't blow your face off." So we went through that again, slowly. But I had to make this gigantic poster-sized piece of paper that surrounded my pedal board that basically had everything that I needed to know on it. So it would be like song 1, verse, preset 031, chorus, preset 057, second verse, preset 031, pre-chorus, preset 019, step forward 3 steps, spin around twice, move to the left, wait for dancers to pass by, back up, bridge, preset 212. This whole thing had to be mapped out for me. because there was so much to do. And there was, so it's not just the parts, but it was the choreography and the presets. And then eventually I had to wear this unbelievably heavy and minorly humiliating blonde-haired wig that...
No.
Oh, yeah, that's the internet is there to show it. So
I know what I'm doing after this interview.
Yeah, just type in Greg Howe, Beat It solo, and you'll see me. Yeah. So I had to wear this wig, and it was a big deal because the wig actually was loaded with fiber optic lights that lit up the stadium during the Beat It solo. And back then, technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. So the big cable that they had, that ran up the back of my shirt was literally about 4 inches in diameter, probably 8 inches in circumference. This gigantic, thick thing that every time I'd have to run out on the stage to do anything, there'd have to be like 2 guys feeding this big thing. Oh yeah, it was insane. So that was an experience that was really outrageous. And eventually, I was on that tour for probably 4 or 5 weeks, and until Jennifer came back. But it was really a great experience, and it was also a great opportunity for credibility on a resume, because this is what really led to a lot of the other gigs. I had eventually I hooked up with a guy named Kevin Andrews, who and he had been the music director for almost everybody that was in the sort of boy band, teen kind of genre. He had been the music director for Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears. Who else? He's currently doing Madonna. He eventually ended up doing Justin Timberlake. I mean, he's worked with the biggest acts, pop acts in the world. And it was good for me because the thing is, in this industry, everything is really about who you know and who's credible and what have you done and so forth and so on. So he liked my guitar playing, but I think it was almost the power of being able to say, I've got Michael Jackson's guitarist, that also worked largely in my favor. So my first of those gigs was the Enrique Iglesias gig, the son of Julio Iglesias. And this was in 2000. And that was like, this is subsequent to his biggest album with, Balamos and all these big hits that he had on it. It was a great tour. It was a fun tour. It was a very family-oriented kind of tour. A lot of the management, it was very tight. It was a really fun tour. And for me at this point, this was great because it was like a vacation from the stress of the struggling musician lifestyle, because I was really not sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a vocal band, but I was kind of getting some notoriety with these instrumental albums I was putting out, but I didn't know where to go with that because it wasn't exactly what I had set out to do, but I was doing it and it was kind of working and people were liking it. And I'm making some money, but I wasn't making a lot of money. I really wasn't putting tours together, which was my own doing. Because I didn't know that I felt committed to being an instrumental guitarist. I just knew that it was cool to be putting these albums out. So it was kind of a stressful, confusing time for me. So when I got the Enrique Iglesias gig, it was kind of like a vacation, because suddenly, for the first time in my life, I'm making a ton of money playing the easiest stuff in the world. I'm like, wow, I'm touring the world. I'm meeting all these great people, seeing all these amazing places. My bank account's getting loaded up, and I don't even have to practice. This is like a vacation. It was literally like going on vacation and getting paid for it.
And you're not touring in a van either. Like you're
not
proper.
touring. Yeah, it's a proper tour. It's big time stuff, and and if you're a single guy, which I was, then it's even a better situation. Traveling. So it was just nothing but fun. And then as soon as I got done with that tour, I was asked to do the NSYNC stadium tour, which is all, 50, 60,000 seater stadiums. And same thing. I said, yeah. I said, why not? So once again, out on the road, doing big money, having having a blast. And that happened again. When that tour ended, there was a little time off, and I was trying to work simultaneously on an album that I did called Extraction with Dennis Chambers and Victor Wooten. Very difficult to do while you're touring, but yeah, I was trying to. So I had a little bit of time in between the two NSYNC tours, because I ended up touring with them 2 consecutive years.
And you did some awards shows, right? I remember seeing, I don't know what it was, Grammys or something, and there's NSYNC playing, and all of a sudden, hey, wait a second, there's Greg Howe in the background.
Oh yeah, I did. Between Enrique Iglesias and NSYNC, I've done the Tonight Show with Jay Leno 5 times. I've done the morning show called the Today Show, I think 4 times. I did almost every award show there is, from the Billboard Awards to the American Music Awards to the Grammys to the Men Strike Back Awards to the MTV Video Music Awards. There's a couple that I'm missing in there, but yeah, almost all the big award shows. Carson Daly, Rosie O'Donnell. I mean, it was all over the place. It was the biggest stuff out there, And so there was a good run of from 2000 to 2003, a good 4 years of that. And eventually I started to realize that it wasn't really fulfilling anymore, because I really wasn't catering to my artistic needs. You know what I mean? My bank account was nice, and and I was getting, I had a lot of great experiences and met a lot of great people, and it was fun, but I really was like, I got to get back to being an artist. I have to, because I could feel the void. So I finished when the second NSYNC tour ended, I was asked by Justin Timberlake to come on tour with his solo thing, because he went solo almost immediately after NSYNC folded. And I did for a while, and then I had to step off. And it was very tough to do this, because the tour paid a lot of money, and it was going to be like a 20-month tour, and it was really hard to say no. Yeah, but I had to walk, and it was tough, but I don't regret it at all, because I got back to being an artist. I finished the Extraction CD, which came out really, really nice, and I was really proud of that record. And then and that eventually I then ended up doing, so that album came out in 2003, I think, or 2003 or 2004, somewhere around there. I still lived in Pennsylvania at the time, and I still wasn't really out touring a whole lot, because there was still this side of me that was always thinking, I want to have a vocal band. That's what I started off wanting to do, was have a vocal band. And I just don't know that I want to go out there as an instrumental guy. But I was, starting to think, maybe it's just in the stars that I'm supposed to be this instrumental guy. Maybe because everything seems to keep working out that way. So in 2005, I moved from Pennsylvania to California, and which was good for me, because along the way I had also been involved in endorsement deals and sponsorship deals. At the time, I had just walked from ESP. I had been with, so to back up a little bit, when I first got my record deal in '88, I had Fender with me, and that lasted until around 96, 97, and then they stopped doing the HM Strat, and they basically said to me, I don't know what we can do for you here, because we're not really doing a 24 fret Floyd Rose thing anymore. So I don't know if you want to stay and, play some standard strats, or I don't know what you want to do, or maybe, it might be in your best interest to find a different company. So shortly after that, I got hooked up with ESP, and that lasted for a while. But then right around 2005, that ended, and I'm not going to get into why it ended, but I'll just summarize it by saying I was a little turned off at finding out that I wasn't even in their catalog after I had been on every single award show, every single TV thing, a stadium tour. I did a clinic in Moscow that had 600 people that attended it, and all for ESP. And I was like, it really bothered me when I went to their booth at the NAMM and saw that I wasn't even in their catalog. I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna walk. And I take some responsibility because I probably should have been a little bit more proactive in staying in touch with them and keeping them abreast as to what was going on. But at the same time, I didn't feel like they were really reaching out much. So at that time, when I moved to California in 2005, I had sort of decided in my mind that I don't want to get with anybody anymore. I don't want to do this sponsorship thing. I've got a lot of guitars. I'd like to have the freedom to just do what I want, play whatever I want. And in 2006, I was approached by a company called Laguna that was a company under the umbrella of Guitar Center. So it was really Guitar Center owned. Yeah. And the person who had started the Laguna line of guitars was a guy named Keith Brawley, who's a well-known luthier in the industry. I think he used to work at Fender and maybe somewhere else. I think. I know he had a big reputation as a great guitar builder. And so he was now working in the corporate end of Guitar Center, and he had convinced the corporate people to allow him to launch this line called Laguna. So I was sort of a free agent at that point, and I was contacted by them, and they sent me some guitars and said, would you want to play? We need someone to come on board, and we need a face to attach to this, that somebody that's high profile of some sort. And when they sent me the guitars, I was like, yeah, they're cool, but they're not really for me. So I said, thanks, but no thanks.
Why?
And then a year later, they just didn't have anything that was working for me. I mean, I'm when it comes to guitars, I'm pretty specific about what I like, what I need, and even though it's usually it's simple, it's not complicated, but it does have to be that way, right? So they just didn't have anything that was that way. So about a year later, they had brought in 2 new people to sort of oversee the Laguna agenda. And they contacted me again and said, we're looking through our records. It looks like we'd sent you a couple of guitars, and you didn't bite. What was the problem? Or and I said what I just said. They're cool, but they're not working for me. And they said, well, what would it take for them to work for you? And I said, well, I would need this, I would need that, I would need blah 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 blah. And they said, well, would you want to work with Keith on designing your own model within the
now we're talking.
Line? Yeah, I said, okay, we can talk about that. And I was very clear with them that if we're going to do this sponsorship arrangement, I want this to be a relationship. I'm really not interested in free gear. One of the things that really turns me off about companies, and I think they do this because they've been beat up so bad by artists who abuse their sponsorships, and all they do is collect free stuff and then unload it on eBay, and that's not who I am. To me, it's like at this point, even at that point, I'm thinking, well, I've got like 40 guitars, and I don't need more guitars. So when you come at me and you say something like, well, here's our standard contract, Greg. We will do, or you will appear at 3 trade shows per year, and we will give you 4 guitars per year, and in the following year we will discuss a blah blah blah. It's all this. To me, it's like, why are we getting together here? the whole thing about an endorsement is that, you know, we're coming together because we believe that the whole will be greater than the individual parts. I'm bringing credibility to your line, and you're bringing support to my career. You're supporting me with a great instrument, and the understanding that if I'm on tour in the middle of, you know, some crazy place east of Siberia, that you guys can provide me with a guitar if it breaks down, and that we can work together. Most importantly, that we can have ongoing dialogue and work together towards constantly and perpetually making the product better and better and better. And that I will be out there, you know, campaigning for this product, and you guys will be supporting my ability to do that. And that's really how I see this. I'm not interested in free stuff. I'd rather have one guitar that I love to play than have some, than just get free stuff out of some contractual obligation. You know, I'm not interested in it. So, and I made that very clear to Laguna when we sat down and talked the first time. I said, you know, I want you to know that the one thing I'm not interested in is free guitars. I have a bunch of guitars. I don't need guitars. What I need is a relationship that's going to feel good and that I'm going to feel good about, because we are making a cool product that can be provided for, you know, a potential consumer, and that people will dig it, and that, you know, my name will help bring credibility to it, and your, you know, corporate power will help make this, you know, enable this to happen. So it was cool in the very beginning with Laguna because, you know, they ran some full-page ads, and we did design the guitar that was eventually called the LE924, the bright orange one that you see in a lot of videos. And I love that guitar. I was really proud of it. It came out exactly how I thought it was going to come out, and I loved the guitar. And I thought it was great. But in 2008, we had the financial crunch, and a lot of people took a hit on that. Now, I don't know the inner workings of Guitar Center, but I know that when you've got a gigantic corporate entity like that with 200 stores, that's not happening without having borrowed a lot of money from banks. And so as soon as that thing happened, Guitar Center immediately changed their policy and pulled way back on inventory and pulled way back on being involved in any endeavor that didn't involve their tried and proven accounts. And at the same time, Keith Brawley, the creator of Laguna, got a new job that was no longer at Guitar Center. So now Guitar Center is looking at Laguna saying, what are we doing with this? Why we're not, you know, we're going to stick with the things that we know work. Ibanez, Marshall, Roland, Korg, you know, we're not in a position, we have no real incentive to dump money into this endeavor that even at best still has built into it a sort of conflict of interest, you know, aspect to it, because, you know, these guys are dealers and they're going to put out a product that's sort of competing with some of their strong accounts. And, you know, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like,
yes, it's true. It's going to piss off Fender and Ibanez.
Absolutely.
And everybody else.
Yeah. And there's less middlemen when it's Guitar Center putting it out. So, I mean, Guitar Center can undercut these prices. They can just put this stuff out for $200-$300, and a kid that comes in there that wants to buy a guitar for $600, they can say, well, if you don't have or if he doesn't have $600, they can say, well, look over here in this direction. We've got this. This is $350, and it's you know, got a nice arch top to it. It's got a contoured top and a nice plane. It looks nice. You know, it plays good. You know, a lot of these cheap guitars are not bad, to be honest with you. So I think that so basically Laguna pulled the plug on the whole. Guitar Center pulled the plug on the Laguna thing. It was really bothersome to me because, you know, exactly what I had wanted exactly what I thought I had established as a premise up front, which is that if we're going to do this, let's do it. Let's have allegiance to one another. Let's have loyalty to one another. Let's see this thing through. I was really disappointed when they pulled the plug. So a lot of what I've been doing for the past 5 years has just been upholding the image of Laguna still being there, because what I didn't want was to, start getting a reputation of a guy that bounces around from company to company. I mean, it bothers me because I'm like one of the most loyal people that these companies will ever know, yet the perception could be exactly the opposite. But if they knew the inner workings, if they knew how this stuff went down, they would see that I'm not really the one initiating the end of these the ending of these relationships. But in 2008, 2008, I did another, or 2007, I recorded another album called Soundproof, which was an album that was really fun to do because I was living in California at the time, and we decided to record the album like we did in the old days, which was go up to Prairie Sun Studios in Cotati outside of San Francisco, which is the studio that Mike Varney often uses. And we recorded it there, which was nice to finally, because almost everything I had done in the 90s was at my home studio, which is cool. But it was nice to just, do it big time again. And so we did that. I had put a new band together with a bass player called John Richard. His name is John Richard, an amazing young bass player. The drummer was a guy named Gianluca Palmieri, great drummer. And then I also had a guy named Dave Cook, who had actually played on the Extraction CD as well. I forgot to mention that. Dave Cook was a guy that I met on tour. He was the keyboard player with NSYNC, but he's also a great jazz pianist. So he played on the Extraction CD, and then I had him come out and play on the Soundproof CD as well. So that album came out in 2008, and then we toured that album. So it was really the first instrumental tour that I had ever done, touring my instrumental music.
And how was the response to that?
It was great. It was great. I was really surprised because, but I think in a certain way, the fact that I had put all these albums out and no one had ever seen me play live really worked in my favor, because it was I go to Europe and these places are packed because everyone's like, oh my God, finally we get to see Greg Howe.
Never come back.
Right. So it was a really fun tour, lucrative and fun, and just really cool. It was really nice to go out there and do something that was my own thing, and have it be successful, and so that was great. And shortly after that, I started to talk with Kevin Vecchione, who I'd known for years, about finally doing a vocal album, because it's, again, it had always been in the back of my mind ever since the end of How To. I was always like, how do I get back on this vocal thing? It's interesting that so many people perceive me as the instrumental guitar guy, when in reality, it was the instrumental thing that was weird for me. That was the weird thing to do. The vocal thing was what I was used to. It was what I set out to do. The instrumental thing was something that sort of just inadvertently happened by way of circumstances and so forth. But so we started talking about a vocal band, and I guess around 2011, Kevin came out here I had moved to Las Vegas by then, and Kevin came out to help me write some stuff. And we had a singer in mind, a guy named Elvio Fernandez, who's now part of the Chris Daughtry band. And and that's the reason that he's not the singer, is because in the midst of writing material and getting it ready for him, he got a gig with Chris Daughtry. So he was no longer available. And So now we were sort of writing, and we didn't know exactly what to do because we didn't have a singer, but we just kept writing because I knew that we could find somebody if we put our minds to it. And Kevin at that point was living on the East Coast and doing the cover band club circuit thing, basically in the Philly, Delaware area. And he came across this female singer who was also playing in a cover band, that he said, you might want to check this out. He said that, so he sent a picture of her, and I thought, oh, she certainly looks great. I had never been in a band with a female, and I'd heard so many horror stories about it that I was almost hoping that she didn't sing good. I'm like, I hope this girl can't sing. Please don't be a good singer. Then he had her come over to his house and do a little recording demo thing so he could send it to me and let me hear. And as soon as I heard her, I thought, shit, she can sing.
Damn it, she's good.
Yeah. But I also thought, this is a really great opportunity because, it's not always the easiest thing in the world to find someone with a great voice and who has a great image at the same time. So I thought this would, maybe this is the route to go. So we started catering the songs more for a female vocalist. I started to get to understand her range a little bit. And then, in 2012, was it, I think? Yeah, we tracked the album. And that's really what was the formation of Marigold.
How has the response been of having you back in a vocal band?
The response has been good. I think that it's a little mixed. I mean, some people, I can tell, they give it a nod of approval, but I can see the expression on their face saying, if you must do this, I guess that's cool. If I must see you in this, if I must see you play guitar in this, but the cool thing about my fans is that they really are into me. And I mean, like, my fans are really loyal. They really are. Yeah. And they're really great people. And so in certain ways, it's almost like they'll take me in any context. They don't care. You come over with Victor Wooten and do some jazz, I'll be there. You're going to come over and do a rock thing with your band, I'll be there. Just if you show up, Greg, I'll be there. And in that sense, it's a really cool thing because I know that there are different kinds of fans, and some fans are really get pissed when
they get offended. They get offended if you change.
Exactly. Right. They get offended, right? And I haven't experienced that. I've experienced the closest thing that I've experienced is just sort of an expression that speaks of, I hope you know what you're doing. But that's about as close as it gets to that.
Do you plan on following it up with another one?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially I'm in the middle of writing right now for it, and I've got some basic tracks that we've got down already, and there's a ton of ideas that need to be pieced together and honed in on. But in between gigs and clinic tours and phone calls and social media and teaching and traveling, I am working diligently on the new album.
And when do you expect that'll be out?
I would like it to come out before, well, it's not going to come out before the end of the year, but I would like to finish it before the end of the year and have it come out,
Oh, that's
March.
Quick. Yeah, that's quick. Okay, so your gun's blazing on it then. Yeah. You're going for it.
Well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen that fast. But if not, then it'll be later in the year. But my goal is to do it because the thing is, what we did wrong. One of the things we did wrong with this album is that this is the first album that I ever put out not on a label. I deliberately wanted to put it out on my own. And nothing against labels. Labels have benefits, but at the same time, it's one thing to, labels have benefits, but they certainly reward themselves for that, for providing them. So
yeah, and the tools are in place now that you can do it by yourself if you choose to.
Exactly, and that's how I felt. I just felt like it might be nice to actually make $10 off of the CDs as opposed to $1.75.
But then you have to do everything.
You have to do everything.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's also big expenses. One of the things that a lot of people don't recognize is the real value of a record label. The real true value of a record label is their in-house PR.
Sure.
That's the real value, because to outsource that is very expensive. If it's going to be effective, it's going to be expensive. And it's necessary. If you're really going to make a buzz, you've got to get a serious publicist, and you've got to have that thing. You got to have that thing working. So what we didn't do correctly is, what we should have done is we should have released the album to the industry first and gotten all the reviews and had the timing of all the reviews come out at the time that the album dropped, because that's what labels do. That's the way you do it. But we really didn't, because we were so late on the release of it that was like, as soon as it was done, I was like, yeah, just put it out. We got to put it out. That's it. Make it available. Put it out. So we just got a little anxious. And what this does is it makes it a little bit more difficult to get tours and things like that, and it also, and to get articles, because the thing is, if you hire a publicist after that, a publicist usually isn't able to do much with old news. I mean, a publicist always needs new. What's happening now? What are you guys doing now? I need something to talk. I can't say, here's a new article about a band that's got an album that came out 6 months ago. It doesn't make any sense. So, but we still had, we had a tour that was set up for Germany last year, or actually earlier this year. And I canceled the tour because I wanted everybody to move to Las Vegas. I didn't want to go over there and, before the band moved to Las Vegas, it was a very cumbersome ordeal. Every single time we need a photo shoot, I have to get on an airplane and go to the East Coast. I have to fly my drummer to the East Coast. Get a hotel, rent a car, blah, 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 blah. We want to do a video. I got to get on a plane, go to the East Coast. I got to,
It's not sustainable.
It's really not.
No.
And it's just not conducive to forward motion and at a pace that's going to amount to anything. So I basically said to the band, look, guys, I think we've got a great product here, and I think that everybody in this band is really cool, but I don't know that I can continue doing this unless we can all live in the same area, and I'm not moving. So if you guys want to move to Las Vegas, if you guys are willing to move to Las Vegas, we can do this, but I don't want to go on tour subsequent to these rushed and hurried and sort of half-committed rehearsals. I don't want people to come to the show and go, yeah, I saw Marigold. They were pretty good.
Yeah.
I want to blow. You know what I mean? I want to blow minds.
You have to blow their minds.
You got to blow their minds, and you can't blow their minds when you're trying to sneak in 4 rehearsals. Because your return flight shows up in 2 days. You know what I mean? Like it can't. It's got to be the right way. So,
did they move?
Yeah, they moved. So we're here now, and it's
That's a big show of faith.
It is, but you need that. If otherwise you're not. Yeah, if you don't believe in yourself enough to make those kind of commitments, then you're really not cut out for this.
All right. Well, it sounds like big things ahead. So where can people find out more about the band?
They can go to marigoldband.com. You'll see our Twitter, our Facebook, our YouTube channel, all of our videos, and everything that you would bios, everything that you would need to know about us is there.
That was Greg Howe. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud. I'll see you next Monday.
Short tongue and you play the one who holds to the pain, but the day is young.